Morning, everybody. Very nice to see everybody this morning. For those of you who made it on, now a few of you were tripped up by an error that occurred. You notice I put that in passive voice because it's so much nicer. You can imagine that the error just occurred out in the universe. Nonetheless, I do have to accept responsibility that I sent you the wrong initial Zoom link because it got scheduled, not it got scheduled. I inadvertently scheduled it for yesterday instead of this morning. So you have the new one, those of you who are on. There'll be a few of you who are very confused because you'll hit the first link and nothing happens. And then you'll all of a sudden see an email pop up this morning. Yes, and here's somebody calling in who didn't get their link, but they'll soon be fixed with that. So at any rate, this is Veiled, a yellow tea. And we have had extraordinary luck over the last couple of years getting some really fine yellow teas. And so this is one of them that we're going to feature this morning. So before we launch into Veiled and yellow tea in general, I want to talk a little bit about shop news. So there have been some important things which have happened this week. First off, we got every single tea except for an odd one or two up on the board. They're on Post-its, so they're not all beautiful as normally we have the teas on the board, but that doesn't matter. They're all servable. That's the key thing right now. We'll get the beauty into the board positions over this next week or so. So that's really good news. We worked really hard this week. We have about 50 new teas. 20 of them are Cliff teas, and we have quite a few new green teas as well. I think about 12 new green teas. So this year was a big concentration of Cliff teas and green teas. We also got some more whites, we got some more raw blacks, and we got some very interesting new red teas. So that's kind of a summary of what we did from that perspective. Now, I want to talk to you about the appearance of 50 new teas because we had a customer in here yesterday who said something that was very key to understanding our position in the business. Customer comes in and says, and sees all the Post-its on the board and says, wow, looks like you got a bunch more new teas. But that's not so unusual. Every year you seem to get a bunch more new teas. This is correct. But then the customer made the following statement. She said, I can always tell how good a tea shop is in terms of Chinese teas, because these years, most tea shops are de-emphasizing Chinese teas because they simply can't get them. And if you're connected, as you are, as we are, that is, you're still getting teas. And so that is one of the big differences in our shop. Most of the shops that are in the US that have Chinese teas are finding the very difficult situation of not being able to get the really good teas. In addition, we found some other evidences, quite by accident, of people who brought in. So this week we had a bunch of unusual things. A person brought in some green tea and said, what do you think of this? And so, of course, we got it out. We have the same green tea, or the same category of green tea, not category, the same specific green tea. And so we brewed them side by side. And all of a sudden, I realized that the green tea that the customer brought in, and the customer realized this pretty quickly as well, was not from the area it was advertised as being from. And it was really shocking to us because it came from a fairly large name purveyor of teas. And so, in fact, we kind of did a mental double take as we were going through this exercise and realized that this tea came from a completely different region than it was advertised. So you're going to see more of that in tea shops, unless, of course, it's here, because the tea shops are not trying to deceive you by and large. By and large, what's happened is they just can't get what they think they're getting. Much of this has to do with the fact that they can't go back to China. And they, even if they can go back, they can't go back to the areas where these teas are from, by and large. And therefore, as stuff is getting sent to them, it's not what they think it is. And that's one of the reasons that we spend so much time testing everything. That's one of the reasons we continue to have a small factory over in China. That's one of the reasons that we double check and then redouble check everything, because we don't want to be victims of stuff like this. And we don't have to be victims of stuff like this. And we are not victims of stuff like this because we built up these type of relationships over the years. And that's the value of really knowing the tea shop owners and really engaging with tea shop owners. That's how you can get real stuff. Yes.
Would the problem come, that type of, well, fraud, basically, if a large company or whatever size were defrauded, would it come from an aggregator having pulled tea from other countries or other regions in China? Or where does the problem begin? Does it begin? It's hard to believe it would begin with the farmer.
This is a great question. This type of apparent LCS behavior, where does it begin? Does it begin with the farmers, or is it with aggregators in China? Do they bait and switch? Is that what is going on? And is that why tea is going to some purveyors that isn't what they think it is? So it's a combination of things. It certainly, by and large, isn't the farmers. Remember this, you cannot, not you, a farmer cannot directly send you tea if everything is going through legal channels. In other words, the rules are very clear from the Chinese perspective. They're very clear from the FDA perspective. If that tea is going to be put on the market, then it must go through inspections, both in China and on the US side. In China, the main thing they're inspecting is, are the water levels, the moisture levels in the tea at the right level? In other words, if they're above 6, 7, or 8%, Chinese customs rejects the whole shipment. You have to start over again. Farmers cannot deal directly to get this stuff done. Farmers don't have an FDA number. FDA numbers are worth money. If you don't have an FDA number and you're trying to get your tea sold in the US will reject it. They'll say, where's the FDA number, farmer? Farmers don't deal with the FDA. And this is why we deal with farmers and then instruct them to go to aggregators. The aggregators have no right from our perspective because they, in effect, are our employees. Employees is not really the right word. Contractors would be a better word. But they follow our instructions and we pay them. And we have this close relationship. Our aggregators, we have a 15 to 20 year history with every single one of our aggregators. Our aggregators wouldn't even have the thought of bait and switch or a fraud go through their head. would not happen because they know us so well, and they also know we'll nail anything that's not right. So this is why we have such a careful process in terms of getting the samples here first. When we were going to China, we were actually carrying the samples back, had them send more samples, test sample against sample to make sure we're all on the same page. Then make our orders against those samples. And when the orders come in, we don't put them on the board right away. This is why it's so laboriously long at this shop, because we test everything. And how are we testing? We are taking the samples and comparing them to the actual goods that come. And so that's why it takes us so long to actually go through this process. We're not only testing that the samples are the same, but we're also finalizing the rules for large cup. So this whole process is extremely laborious. Most tea purveyors do not go through this process because most use a wholesaler, and with a wholesaler, bait and switch can occur, and there's lots of reasons that it can occur. Most of the time, the reasons are on purpose, but sometimes there's a real underlying problem that they're trying to resolve. So for example, this year in certain areas, no workers could get to the area during harvest. And so if a tea purveyor has made an order for a tea, let's say Premier's Choice, and none of the workers were able to go there, there is no Premier's Choice from the region where Premier's Choice comes from. So anything that is being called Premier's Choice is coming from some other region, and therefore it really isn't Premier's Choice. That doesn't mean it's a bad tea, by the way, because tea produced in other regions can be good teas. You just can't call them something else and add a premium in terms of pricing for the something else. So that's one of the big things that's important in the tea industry. And again, this week we had several examples of stuff or of actions that have occurred which affect the quality and the reliability of what people think they're getting. We had a brand new person come in yesterday who told me they were directly ordering from a tea company in Guangdong province. Who knows what that really means in terms of how that company is put together. And certainly they're not going through inspection. It's a private transaction between the tea company and the consumer, because this is an end user. Their end users presumably not selling to the public. And the end user came in here yesterday and ordered up a yellow tea of all things and said they were excited to try it, and then came back and said, after they tasted it, oh, this is very light. So it's almost a comment that it's really hard to respond to, because this person had the assumption that they knew quite a lot about yellow teas and didn't realize that this particular yellow tea, and it was Junshan Needle, is supposed to have a certain flavor profile, which it did. And so when I explained this to him, he was a little bit discombobulated. And part of the discombobulation was he brews tea using small cup. So I ask you this, and then we'll launch. I'm using this to launch into the yellow teas. This is a transition you're hearing right now. Is yellow tea in China? Oh, in fact, let me add a little bit more to this question. Is yellow and green tea in China typically done in small cup? Is it a Gong Fu tea, so to speak? And the answer would be no. Almost everywhere in China, including at the farms, they make it in a larger cup. They do not use Kung Fu technique to do this type of tea. That's just the custom. And so when you go into a company or you go into a police station, you see them all drinking out of a large cup. Now, remember, these are Chinese in China, so they're not using supersized large cups. They're not using this size. That's where we came in. They're using an 8 to 10 ounce. We took the 8 to 10 ounce. Actually, it's more like a 10 to 12 ounce and moved it up to a 16 ounce. So this is why when anybody is trying to use Kung Fu techniques against, or for, I should say, a green tea or a yellow tea, that at the end of the day is a fail if you're trying to match what they think in China the best flavor is. And that's why you have some discrepancies, and users sometimes are very confused because it's like, well, when I brew this, it tastes lots of flavor, and I do it in this small cup fashion. I use a gaiwar, and I can get some real flavor out of it. Well, that's great. I'm glad you're able to do that, but that's not the way the Chinese in the tea industry and outside of the tea industry in China perceive the best flavor and the best value. And that's why we enter the quality arena every time we do teas, because that's what they're looking for. So yellow tea, we're finally in yellow tea after this long intro. And by the way, I'm going to take one very tiny digression, and then we're going to really be fully in the yellow tea. Many of you during this period realized that we were naming teas. And I always appreciate all the great suggestions everybody has. But remembering that naming process has a lot of steps to it. There's nothing wrong with the suggestions. We, though, by and large, have used other names, and there's reasons behind it. All right, so today's tea, veiled. And where does it come from? Now, for those of you who got up late this morning, late being defined, say at 9:10, at about 9 o'clock, I sent you a map of Anhui province. So veiled comes from Anhui province. It comes from Jinzhai County, Jinzhai County. So I sent you a map so we could all be on the, in quotes, same page. So let's look at this map. And let me get my copy of this map out and help you identify where Jinzhai County is. And why is it important to go through an understanding of where this is? Because yellow tea, while it grows in 5 or 6 provinces, that makes it sound like it's mass produced. Answer to this would also be no. It's very small production, usually consumed within the production area. By production area, I mean that in a liberal sense. In other words, Jinzhai County, maybe the county, the next 2 counties over, but it's usually not consumed very far away from where it's produced. Is producing yellow tea an inexpensive process? The answer is no. It is not an inexpensive process. Therefore, when it's produced, in some of the areas where it's produced, some farmers shortcut the steps and actually produce green tea. And that's why there's some confusion sometimes between the yellows and the greens, because occasionally something is advertised as a yellow, that's actually truly a green because the farmer skipped the sealing the yellow step. We'll talk about what sealing the yellow step means. So let me tell you what you're going to know by the end of today's session. First off, you're going to know veiled. We'll go through that. We'll taste it. This will be your first in a series of 3 yellows that we're going to do. This is going to give you some perspective about what yellow teas can be. That's one thing you're going to know. Secondly, you're going to know the areas from where yellow tea broadly comes from. So let's talk about those right now. Anhui is in terms of yellow tea, an important area. Sichuan, Mengding is an important area. Remember, important doesn't mean they're producing a ton, but they're famous. Zhejiang also produces yellow tea. Hunan produces yellow tea, as does Hubei. So 5 or 6 provinces, actually Canton province produces a very tiny bit of yellow tea. So 5 or 6 provinces produce yellow tea, not well distributed or not widely distributed in China. Very few Chinese have actually had yellow tea, although every Chinese person will tell you that among the 6 categories of tea, there's yellow tea. So everybody knows that yellow tea is a separate category, but very few have had it. Even fewer, of course, in the US. All right. So, let's look at this map, and then I'll get us to where we're supposed to be in terms of tasting and so forth. All right, so bring your map up, and let's look closely at this map. If you look and you go down, let's see, go down isn't the right word. So look at the center of Anhui, and you'll see in red letters, Hefei, H-E-F-E-I. So find that, and then go due west. And if you just draw a straight line west, you'll see near the border of Anhui, right underneath, there's a blue lake, and it's actually not a lake, it's a reservoir, Jinzhai, Jinzhai. This is exactly where this area is exactly where this comes from. And it's a mountainous area. It's a wonderful tea producing area. And in fact, it's not far from another important tea producing area. And the reason I'm bringing this up will be apparent shortly. So find Jinzhai, and then from Jinzhai, go east again in a direct line, and you're going to see a tomb of Gao Tao or Gao Tiao. My map is small, so I can Gao Tao. And right to the right of that, you see Luan, L-U-A-N. These are the 2 places I wanted you to be aware of on this map today. And the reason being is Luan is where Premier's Choice comes from. But wait, Premier's Choice is not a yellow tea. That's very true. But some of the technique for which Jinzhai yellow tea is made comes from or originates in Luan, where Premier's Choice is made. So again, as we go through the steps, I'll make that link for you. By the end of the day, you'll understand the steps. Next week, we're going to talk a lot about the chemical composition of the tea. You know, what does it cure? How much longer you're going to live after you drink the tea? All the things that we normally talk about. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I don't say them like that. We'll focus on that next week. But today, you'll get all the basics so that when we get into the weeds next week, you'll really be ready for that. Okay, so I think because I've talked for so long and because the tea master has been waiting for the last 10 minutes, I think she means she's thirsty. And undoubtedly, you're all thirsty. She's going to demonstrate how to make bale, and then she'll brew along with you. So it is with great pleasure that I bring the parched tea master.
Thank you. Yeah. So we do yellow tea, huh? Today. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Yeah. My name is Bei. B-E-I. Bei, not Bay Area. But simple. I introduce myself. Bay Area. My name is Bei. Bei. Yeah. Today, so this is the, same usual. This is my space, huh? So this is my style of three. So if people like it two, it's okay. But I like it three. Okay. So yellow tea, huh? From the Anhui. So same, the full grams. skip 2 minutes, but the focus 是他们吃哈。So you're watching. Thank you.
So the normal tableau, tea tray, and then she uses 3 cups so she can cool the water down faster. But if you use 2 cups to dissipate the steam, 0 problem. Remember, you're going to use 170-degree water. We not only are cooling or dissipating the steam, we're also making sure that the cups are absolutely clean, no soap stains on them. You notice we don't cover the cups. Why don't we cover the cups when we're brewing? Because I don't know about you, but I don't like flat flavor. When you cover the cups and you brew too hot, you create flat flavor. So you notice that she's putting water in all of the glasses, making sure they're absolutely clean. She's putting 200-degree water in. You can use any temperature between 175 and 212. Does not matter what you use when you're cleaning the cups, because you're not only double or making sure that the cups are absolutely clean, but you're also setting it up so that when you put the leaves in the warm cup, you'll get that aroma right off the bat. So now the tea master is drying the water that she's actually going to use for brewing, and she's dissipating the steam. We, in this water tower, have the water set at 175. So it's not only to dissipate the steam, but actually also to lower the temperature such that it's close to 170, or if possible, a little below. And you notice there's not a huge rush to do this. It's just steady rhythm. We're present at what we're doing. We want to make sure we don't have water going all over the place. The only way you can have water not going all over the place is to be present while you're doing this. This is all part of tea rhythm. And she pours the water back into the pot. And there's a reason for that, because actually, when you pour the water in the cup that has the leaves, you have better aim control. And so you can pour on the side of the cup and not scald the leaves directly. All right, so she's picking up bag number 1, which you're not going to do yet, but you will in a minute, labeled veil. She's putting the 4 grams into the heated cup. She's going to shake. She covers to make sure not even 1 leaf escapes. She smells. Did I use the right tea? Yes. And pours on the side of the cup. In the meantime, we set the timer for 2 minutes. And start. So already, even from this distance away, I'm getting a signal from this tea. And it's not a visual signal, it's an olfactory signal. I can already smell, I smelt the dry leaves after she put them in there. All right. So I set the timer for 2 minutes. Indeed, I did. Beautiful aesthetic. You have half at the bottom, half on the top. All right, and we're going to think now about the process of doing yellow tea in general. Is every yellow tea done exactly the same? No, it is not. But the general steps are relatively the same, and some are exactly the same. So there's 3 types of picks, right? You have a pick that's a bud only, so Junshan needle represents that. You have large leafed yellow tea, and you have small leafed yellow tea. This is small leafed yellow tea from Jinjaiba. So you pick and then you wither. No matter what, every single yellow tea goes through those first 2 steps. Remembering that withering, and they wither outside if it's not raining. If it's raining, they wither inside. And what's the objective? It's to reduce the moisture content of the tea leaf. So you want to reduce it from 100%, which is when you've just picked it, down to no more than 70%. So they are somewhere between they're aiming for somewhere between 60 and 70%. 2 minutes is over. Tea Master is separating the tea liquid from the tea leaves. You're going to save these leaves because you get a great second steeping. First thing we're going to do is enter the quality arena. But before we do that, we're going to look at the color of this thing. So it's a yellowish color, right? Makes sense? Yellow tea. Even before I smell these leaves, I actually have smelled them. In other words, the aroma is so strong. Even before I stick my nose in here, I have a pretty good idea already about this. Wow. All right. Quality arena. What are we talking about here in the quality arena? So we're going to evaluate mouthfeel, astringency. Where is it? We're going to evaluate density. Is it thin? Is it dense? Is it thick? Use any of those terms. We're going to evaluate aftertaste. After you swallow, you get some sort of feeling at the back of your mouth, entry of your throat. What is that feeling? And then lastly, energetics. So people call this all sorts of things. We call it energetics. And I'm specifically talking about what's the physical manifestation you have after drinking this tea. Is everyone's energetics the same? Well, let's think about this for a moment. Are all of us clones? Are we all genetically the same? No, we're not. Therefore, it's impossible for the energetics, even our understanding of astringency, all of these things are going to be slightly different. Now, there's guardrails. You can't be out of bounds out of the guardrails. If you tell me the energetics are my big toe on my left foot turns red hot, you know what? You're out of bounds or you're an alien, one or the other. Okay, so let me go ahead and smell this. I smell the leaves already. Okay, and now let's enter the quality arena. Not you yet, I'm entering. $170 sip. That means you can take more and you roll it in your mouth. And even as I'm talking to you, I'm sensing where the astringency is. And now I'm sensing an aftertaste. Let me do that again. And even as you go through this exercise, you then expand what you're looking at. Okay, you define aroma, you define taste, you're paying attention. Where are the energetics? What are the energetics? Some of you may say, I don't get any energetics. And that's fine, because speed of ascension, speed of feeling energetics is different in all of us. So that's no problem. So don't feel badly if the answer is, well, nothing yet. All right, so it's your turn to brew.
The taster says she can smell the leaves through the plastic bag.
That's great. So one of the tasters, one of the participants says that they can smell the leaves through the plastic bag. Great observation. That's how powerful these leaves are. Good thing we had all 3 sessions of yellow tea. Otherwise, we'd have mixed flavors. It's just like when we send out jasmine, we have to put them in a complete set, not just a plastic bag, a complete separate setup. All right, so you're getting your glass ready with any temperature of water between 175 and 200, or 212, I should say. And what you're going to do, which you've seen the tea master already do, is make sure that both cups have received that heated water. And now you're going to dissipate the steam and in effect cool the water as well. And remember, you can never err with this type of tea on the side of too low. If it ends up being 168 or 163, you will still enjoy this tea. And you notice there's just a nice rhythm. The whole tea rhythm, again, is about being present. So you're going to take bag number 1, labeled number 1, called veiled. You'll put the leaves in the heated cup. You'll set your timer should already be set for 2 minutes, but if it isn't, you should set it. You shake the leaves. You smell the leaves. And then you add the water to the side. And you notice, not in a hurry, just very gentle. All right, and you heat the receptacle cup. So yours should be looking about like this, half on the bottom, actually maybe a little more than half on the bottom, and the remainder floating at the top. And we're talking about the process. We've gotten through the pick. You know that there are 3 different types of pick: a bud, small leaf, or a large leaf. The varietals and location determine which of those picks you're going to make. And whatever pick you make will also determine the seal the yellow process. We're not there yet. We've picked, we've withered. We're down to 60 to 70% of moisture. We then fry the leaves. What are we attempting to do when we apply heat to the leaves? We're attempting to deactivate the biochemical enzyme in the tea leaves. We don't want that active. we are gonna want oxidation, but not from that enzyme. That's why we heat these leaves up to between 300 and 400 degrees. We usually don't fry them all that long. Anywhere from 2 to 6 minutes, something like that. Immediately after you're done heating the leaves. So now when I say heating the leaves, I'm really referring to veiled. They take that and then they actually knead the leaves or they roll the leaves. They're trying to break the surface and allow the insides of the leaves to be, inside cells of the leaves to become exposed. And let's back up a minute, because if it's a bud, and that's not the case with this, but Junshan needle is a bud, the kneading actually occurs during the process of frying the leaves because they use their hands to flatten the buds. But in this, no, they actually use a machine, or in some cases, the very traditional still rolled by hand. After you've rolled, or after the tea has been rolled, now you start the sealing of the yellow process. What does this really refer to? In some way or another, you're going to create an oxidative environment. An oxidative environment. God, that sounded like two large words. What does that mean? It means high humidity and relatively higher temperature. It also means wrapping in a segregated package the tea leaves. And in some cases, it is an actual piece of paper that's specially manufactured for that purpose. Junshan needle, think that. In other cases, it's actually not a piece of paper, but it's a cloth. Oh, okay. So you're doing one or the other. And the timer, you know, our timers are very silent sometimes, especially when the understudy makes an error. They're extremely silent. And so I just heard the silent timer, the tea master heard the silent timer go off, as I'm sure you heard your noisy timers go off. And you separate the tea liquid from the tea leaves.
The aroma is significant, says the participants, just jumping out of the cup.
The aroma is uncontained. It jumps straight out of the cup. The catch.
Woody and slightly smoky.
Woody and slightly smoky. So I'm going to ask all of you to hold that thought in your mind, and then I want to revisit that particular one, because I love woody. I'm not as excited about smoke, but I would be excited about another word. Yes.
Somebody else says she gets a bright sweetness with a roast in the wet leaves.
Good. So a bright sweetness and a roast. So from my perspective, what you're defining as a smoky aroma, we really here would say it's a roasty aroma. And this doesn't make what you said wrong, by the way, because there's degrees of things, right? But if you had smoky pine here and you put the cup right beside this cup and smelt each one, oh yeah, this is smoky, this is roasted.
The dry leaves in the bag are have a slightly vegetal aroma, and then into the French press, I detected a bit of toastiness. I'll get to the next part of her long comment.
Okay.
Start with that.
So vegetalness initially in the bag, and then once they got warmed up, a toastiness.
This taster also loved washing the tightly rolled leaves in the tea broth mini lurking on the top, and then they become heavy with the water.
Love the configuration of the tea leaves, some on the top and then some dropping down into the water.
A participant got chocolate in the bag, a sense of chocolate, and then popcorn when warmed.
Wow, love this comment. Chocolate and then popcorn. I really love this comment for a lot of reasons. Next week, we're going to talk about the relationship of chocolate and yellow tea, because there is a relationship. I want to focus on the popcorn. Both comments, very, very relevant. The popcorn is truly the primary response that we get in the shop about this particular tea.
Interesting. These two other people also immediately were like, yeah, I agree on the popcorn corn comment. Somebody else says the mouthfeel is ultra smooth and it lingers through to an aftertaste.
Mouthfeel ultra smooth, absolutely right. And it lingers through to the aftertaste. So, you know, one of the things you're really catching here is that there is roastiness, a popcorniness, a smoothness from start until you swallow. And one of you also mentioned right away how the aroma is uncontained. It just leaps all over the adjacent space.
Somebody notes she's getting roasty, vegetable, seed, slight umami / popcorn, and then almost a sour sweetness.
Roasty, slight umami, vegetal,
a sour sweetness,
and then a sour sweetness. So I like this comment, even the part that ordinarily I would be a little bit hesitant about. I do like the fact that you said sour sweetness, and I'll tell you why. Because when we talk about this sweetness, for those of you who've had healing or gold tip or sweet melody, those sweetnesses dominate. And there's never any hint of sour connected to those sweetnesses. I believe that this commentator is making this comment very validly to actually make a differentiation and say, wow, because the commentator included also a vegetalness, which vegetalness roasted, and then seed. There was all of these flavor attributes and aroma attributes. And what the commentator is really saying is that these are all mixed together, modulating an underlying sweetness. Love the comment.
Somebody else, another participant says she's also noticing the vegetal more strongly than the subtle roast now. The umami's like rice for her at the end and a full mouth feel.
Umami is like rice for this particular commentator in a full mouthfeel. Let's go back to umami and rice. Love this comment, and the Chinese would love this comment as well, because many of the Chinese commentators talk about hints of rice, particularly bottom of the pot rice. You know how you make a pot of rice? Well, let me put it this way. If it's a tea master, this never happens. You know, there's no rice sticking on the bottom. But understudy makes a pot of rice. Oh, there's a little bit sticking on the bottom. Oh, a little brown. And there's the smell of that. That's this smell. And the Chinese would say that.
And in Persian food, actually, that crusty bit is a whole specialty, the bottom dry, actually. Another commenter says, as soon as the leaves got wet, it smelled very different. It smelled of dark roasted chocolate, similar to a tablet form of drinking chocolate from Latin America, also Mexico and the Philippines.
Oh, this is very interesting. I, again, love this comment. And part of the reason I love this comment is I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take part of next week's discussion and move it here right now, because you're getting that sense of dark chocolate, but you're modifying that sense, you know, almost like Mexican dark chocolate or dark chocolate from Central America. Love this modification. So what are the large chocolate companies? I'm not talking about Nestle's. Let's back up. What are the large craft chocolate companies experimenting with? They're experimenting with powdered yellow tea, mixing it with the chocolate. And I was so surprised as I came across these articles about that. Now, why are they doing it? Well, obviously, one thing is taste. The other thing is that the polyphenols in the chocolate match up, sync up really well with the polyphenols, or complement the polyphenols in the yellow tea. Highly antioxidant, highly anti-inflammatory. So you're seeing from a health perspective. And why are these companies doing this? And I'm shortening a little bit what next week's would have been, but I since you mentioned this 2 or 3 times, I really wanted to identify this. So part of the reason we have oxidative stress is 1 or 2 of us have no self-control. We eat too much sugar. You know, that would be an understudy type of activity. And by having a strong antioxidant component with something that tastes good, then you can sneak a little sugar in there, and you reduce the oxidative stress related to that. So this was the thing that just shocked the heck out of me as I was getting ready to, or as I was doing research for today's session. And I had this whole big thing planned for next week when we were talking about chemical constituents. But you forced me to bring it up by your great observations. Yes.
Another taster gets that burnt popcorn kernel flavor that's part of popcorn popped without butter. And then somebody else notes the astringency was low to start, and then it diminishes as it cools and ages in the cup.
Low to start astringency, which diminishes as the cup cools. Love that comment. So yellow tea in general, and hold on to the whole comment for me in a minute, because I want to go back to it. But this one in particular, this part of it in particular, I want to go through a little bit more detail. One of the overwhelming characteristics of yellow tea is this light astringency. Every yellow tea you're going to taste has light astringency. That doesn't mean that the flavors aren't going to be widely different. And that's a characteristic of yellow tea. And so really, when you're thinking of introducing people to loose leaf tea, yellow tea is a very safe choice, because, especially like this, because it's flavors that Americans are used to on their palate, and they can feel good about those flavors. What was the rest of that comment?
Well, it was a different commentator was teasing out more about the popcorn theme.
Okay.
For him, he got a sort of more like a burnt popcorn kernel. And then afterward, another taster got more like a roasted sweet, but related roasted sweet corn, maybe.
But both comments. Popcorn, burnt popcorn kernel, and a roasted cornmeal type.
Roasted sweet corn.
I'm sorry, roasted sweet corn type of flavor. So again, when's the last time in all the tea tastings that we've ever done have we mentioned corn? We've never mentioned it before. It is so distinctive in this, whether it's that burnt kernel or a little sweetness or even a sour sweetness. This leaves the usual constructs of how to understand Chinese teas. And this is why when we talk about yellow teas, it's so hard initially for Americans without having tasted to understand what yellow teas are, because it doesn't have that entry point that so many other teas have. And this is the great thing about this. It's truly unusual, and it's due to the sealed yellowing process.
Somebody else gets a sort of Japanese hojicha type of a
Ah.
sense from it, that roasted.
Great comment. Japanese, to this commentator, there's a similarity in this flavor and aroma to Japanese hojicha. This might be one of the reasons that the Japanese love yellow tea so much. They've done a lot of research on Chinese yellow teas, and their conclusion is yellow teas are just fabulous for the liver. Now, again, we're going to be talking about all this stuff next week, all the chemical constituents, all the guesses, all the research about what this may be beneficial for, but this is a good time to kind of clue you in. You're cluing me in to how we should talk about this because you're bringing up these analogies. Great, great job.
Tying back in with somebody else's earlier rice comment, another participant gets a sense of genmai cha undertone.
Oh, also a great comment. So from hojicha, which is one characteristic, this commentator has gone to, or another commentator has gone to gunmai cha, which is toasted rice or barley with green tea. And yes, indeed, this is within that realm of flavors. And great catch on that.
Another participant says, the flavor is such that he'd like to follow it with something that contrasts the roasty flavor.
Ah, okay. And so this commentator says this roast is so distinct that they would be looking for something to follow this that would contrast with the roasty flavor. And actually, for those of you who've had Junshan needle, Junshan needle is about as different as you can get from, if you're in the yellow tea realm, from this. This, just as you said, all of you said at the beginning, this jumps out at you. It doesn't let your mind wander. It really focuses you on interesting, unusual tastes. Junshan needle is very different. There's subtleness in there. Is this thing subtle? Oh no. This thing is a jealous yellow tea. It's not subtle at all. It is, look at me. I am head.
Another participant says she's getting astringency in the front of the mouth and the tongue, and then it's a juicy, smooth swallow, energetically warm to the core, eye-opening.
Love this comment. So a little bit of astringency at the front of the tongue. I actually get it at the middle, but we're all in the same ballpark with this, a juiciness and a mellowness at the same time. And then at the end, from an energetics perspective, a warmth. So it's counterintuitive. Why do I say that? Because when you look at this tea liquor, this is light. It's a little darker than green, but I'm imagining this will be cooling. Oh no, this one is not cooling at all. This has that warmth. In fact, I feel it strongly in the upper chest, into the shoulders.
As another participant says, as the tea gets cooler, she's getting a little bit of fruitiness, similar to biting like a green, luscious, juicy apple.
Oh, interesting. So this particular commentator gets a little bit of fruitiness as the cup cools, as the tea liquid cools, almost like a little bit of a green apple flavor. And so what this tells you is that the flavors, this is so flavorful that, as is typical, and we see this mostly in the cliff teas or in the oolong teas, where you, as you drink through the cup, the flavor layers and many times gives you different looks. Well, you're telling me somewhat similar here. The flavor is layered and it's giving you different looks. Good catch.
Another participant sort of rounding out some of the observations: nutty aroma, middle tongue astringency, energetics, pleasant, buzzy warmth, stimulating the whole body.
I love this. Pleasant, buzzy warmth, stimulating the whole body. And again, counterintuitive, because you look at the color of this. Well, these are all the leaves is what I'm looking at. These are almost pure green. It's probably going to be cooling. The answer is no. Then why is that again? Because of the oxidation. So remembering, of course, that what's the sealing, the yellow, and the oxidation. Remembering, of course, that the reds in general are thought of as extremely warming, and that's because of the oxidation. Well, this is not unoxidized, though it is not enzymatically oxidized, it's still oxidized.
And so next week, we're going to talk about how yellow tea compares to green, oolong, or white as it relates to possible health benefits.
Yes, so the question is, next week, will you open the magic medical book from ancient Chinese doctors, which will identify when we drink this, where precisely are we going to get that health benefit and how much of a health benefit we're going to get. And yes, that's in next week's. So there's good reason. You know, it's just like, I've arranged this just like the famous Chinese novels. The Water Margin is one of them. The Monkey King is another one. Romance of the Three. So you've heard of these famous novels. Well, at the very end, there's always that line which says, well, and he almost fell over the brink. We'll have to talk about this next chapter. Okay, so let's see where my lack of self-control. Oh, okay, not as bad as usual. Today, we covered quite a lot in terms of processing. And by the way, I'll finish up the processing before we actually finish up, because I want to talk about the sealed yellow or sealing the yellow portion of this in a little bit more detail. It won't take me long. But again, in summary, we'll have covered the process. We'll have gotten the surprise of our lives in terms of this flavor profile and how unusual it is for a tea, and what a good introduction to yellow tea in terms of a flavor profile, mouthfeel. So let's finish up the process and then we'll truly be finished with this week, and we'll focus next week again on chemical constituents, what makes it smell the way it smells, and things like alleged health benefits. All right, so this sealing the yellow is absolutely the critical process. So they break down the leaves, and that's not really said correctly. What they do is they segregate the leaves in about 2-pound packages. Some segregated into larger packages. Nobody segregates them into smaller packages. They put it in a room that's usually around 88, 89, 90 degrees, usually is fairly humid. It's temperature and humidity control. They do it for X number of time period. So it can be from 30 minutes up to 72 hours. Junshan needle is a 72-hour process. This one here is about a 5-hour process. And then on a scheduled basis, now that sounds too general, doesn't it? I have to say it that way because every varietal and every farmer is different. They break down those packages. Sometimes, in some cases, they apply baking heat. And again, what might they be doing? What they're really trying to do is reduce moisture, because remember, they've had it percolating along in a warm and humid environment, so they want to get that moisture down. Can't have too much moisture in the tea leaves, and then repackage it and go through the process 2 or 3 times. And at the very end, and by the way, the 72-hour process, they go over through that through a 3-day period, and they're packing and unpacking every 2 to 4 hours. So it's a big, intense process. This a little bit less intense. So at the end of the process, they got to do a final baking. Why? Because again, the amount of water is too much in the leaves. So they do a final baking. They do a slow bake. So the intermediary step of baking is a higher temperature. So what do we mean by higher temperature? Somewhere between 275 and 300. What do we mean by lower temperature? Somewhere between 150 and 200, something like that. It's longer. You get it ready for packaging, sort through, make sure there's nothing in the leaves that's not supposed to be there, and then you get it on market. So what does this tell you right away about how expensive this is to make? Oh my gosh, you got to be doing this packing and unpacking of all the leaves. You're touching all the leaves a lot of times. That means you have to have lots of people. Oh, that's just one problem. What about the space in this temperature and humidity controlled area? You got to have real space. So it's a much more expensive. So if you're an LCS farmer, heaven forbid, and you're thinking to yourself, you know what? I can make more money if I just skip that sealing the yellow. And then I'll just put in a package which says it comes from Jinjiai, yellow tea region. And everybody's going to assume it's yellow tea. Yes.
When they rebag, are they pressing the leaves to push more moisture out?
Oh, that's a great question. A really great question. The questioner asked, when they repackage, do they, just tamp those leaves down so that they, get that moisture out? Answer is no. They repack it. The moisture reduction comes really only from the application of heat. Why would it not come from application of pressure? Because then you'd have to train a bunch more workers. Okay, this is X pounds per square centimeter of pressure. I want you to learn this X pounds. Oh, I mixed the units. I was trying not to do that. At any rate, you know what I mean. The pressure, and that's unrealistic. They use the heat to do that. All right. You all are amazing. You really captured the essence of this tea. You asked great questions. I can't wait to get to next week because, next week I get to use all these long words and it'll be a lot of fun. Your responsibility this week is to stay healthy. Look forward to seeing you all next Saturday. You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.